It was a sunny Saturday morning when I set off on my road trip, the thrill of adventure coursing through my veins. After months of planning, I was finally on my way to the coastal town of Crescent Bay, where I'd spend the next week soaking up the sun and enjoying the ocean. Armed with a playlist of my favorite songs, a cooler full of snacks, and a sense of freedom, I slid into my car, ready to hit the open road. The first few hours were blissful. The windows were down, the wind tussling my hair, and I sang along to the music, feeling like I was in my own little movie. The highway stretched endlessly before me, flanked by lush green fields and distant rolling hills. I stopped for gas in a small town where the locals were friendly, and I picked up a few snacks to keep me fueled. The atmosphere was warm and welcoming, and I felt a sense of excitement for the adventure ahead. As the hours passed, the scenery began to change. The flat fields gave way to dense forests, and the roads wound through towering trees that seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky. I decided to take a detour to explore a scenic route I had read about. It was supposed to provide stunning views of the landscape, and I figured it would be a nice break from the drive. Following the winding roads that led me deeper into the forest, I reveled in the beauty around me. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the road. I felt a sense of peace wash over me, completely immersed in the tranquility of nature. After a while, I finally reached the overlook, which was even more breathtaking than I had imagined. I parked the car and stepped out, inhaling the crisp, fresh air. As I walked to the edge of the overlook, I was struck by the vastness of the view. The valley below was a patchwork of green and brown, with the river snaking through it. I stood there for a while, taking it all in, feeling grateful for the chance to escape the hustle and bustle of city life. But as I turned back to head to my car, I noticed a small path leading into the woods. Curiosity gnawed at me, and I decided to explore just a bit further. After all, I had time, and who knew what I might find? I ventured down the path, the sounds of the forest enveloping me, the rustle of leaves, the chirping of birds, and the distant sound of water flowing. The path twisted and turned, becoming narrower and more overgrown. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I paused, glancing around, but all I saw were trees and the flickering sunlight filtering through the branches. I told myself it was just my imagination and pressed on. After a few minutes, I stumbled upon a small clearing. In the center stood an old, dilapidated cabin, its wood weathered and gray. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years, and a sense of unease washed over me. I hesitated, but my curiosity got the better of me. What kind of stories could this place tell? I approached the cabin, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet as I stepped onto the porch. The door hung slightly ajar, and I pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the air was musty, filled with the scent of decay. Sunlight streamed through the broken windows, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air. The interior was bare, save for a few pieces of old furniture, a rickety table, a chair with tattered upholstery, and a cracked mirror hanging crookedly on the wall. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I couldn't help but to explore further. I moved cautiously through the cabin, my heart racing with a mix of excitement and dread. As I stepped into what appeared to be a small bedroom, I noticed something strange on the wall. A series of strange symbols carved into the wood. They looked ancient and unsettling, like some sort of warning. I stepped closer, studying them, when I heard a noise from outside. It was a low, guttural growl echoing through the trees. My heart stopped. Every instinct told me to leave, but I was frozen in place, fear gripping me. I backed away slowly, my eyes darting toward the door. Just as I turned to flee, I heard the sound of footsteps crunching on the leaves outside. Panic surged through me, and I bolted out of the cabin, adrenaline fueling my flight. I ran down the path, heart pounding in my chest. The woods seemed to close in around me, shadows stretching ominously as I navigated the underbrush. I could hear the footsteps behind me, growing closer, and I pushed myself to run faster. I burst out of the trees and back onto the main road, my car in sight. I fumbled with my keys, desperation flooding my veins. My hands shook as I unlocked the car and jumped inside, slamming the door shut. I took a moment to catch my breath, glancing out of the windows, but there was nothing, only the stillness of the woods. I started the engine, relieved when it roared to life. I didn't look back as I drove away, my heart still racing from the encounter. I didn't understand what just happened, but I felt a sense of dread lingering in the pit of my stomach. The rest of the drive felt like a blur. I tried to shake off the unease, focusing on the road ahead. I turned the music up, hoping it would distract me, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the cabin and the sounds I had heard. As I neared Crescent Bay, I finally began to relax, the coastal town's charm welcoming me with open arms. I checked into a small motel and decided to unwind by the beach. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore was soothing, and I felt the tension slowly melt away. That night, I fell asleep easily, the fatigue of the day finally catching up to me. But as I slept, I was plagued by nightmares. The growling echoed in my mind, the shadows from the woods closing in around me. I woke up in a cold sweat, heart racing, and I struggled to calm myself. The next day, I tried to put the events of the previous day behind me. I spent the morning exploring the town, soaking in the sun, and enjoying the local cuisine. But even as I laughed and chatted with the locals, the memory of the cabin haunted me, whispering in the back of my mind. By evening, I decided to take a walk along the beach to clear my head. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. I felt a sense of peace wash over me as I walked, the sound of the waves soothing my nerves. But as darkness fell, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I noticed fewer people on the beach, and the air seemed heavier, charged with an unsettling energy. I decided to head back, my instincts telling me it was time to retreat. As I walked back to my motel, I heard the familiar growl again, faint but unmistakable. My heart dropped, and I quickened my pace. I glanced over my shoulder, but the beach was empty, shrouded in darkness. When I reached my motel, I locked the door behind me, trying to convince myself that I was safe. I turned on the lights, but the shadows in the corner seemed to loom larger. I tried to distract myself by watching TV, but the feeling of being watched lingered. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to find sleep. The growl echoed in my mind, and I felt a chill creeping through the room. Just when I thought I might finally drift off, I heard a soft knock at the door. I froze, my heart racing. Who could it be at this hour? "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. There was no response, just another soft knock, insistent this time. "Who is it?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. I grabbed my phone, ready to call for help if needed. But before I could reach for it, I heard a whisper, chilling and low. "Let me in." I felt ice run through my veins. It was the same voice from my nightmares. I backed away from the door, my breath coming in quick gasp. "Go away!" I shouted, desperate. Silence enveloped the room, and I waited, frozen in fear. Then the knocking returned, louder and more aggressive. "Let me in!" The voice echoed, sending waves of terror through my body. I scrambled to the window, peeking through the curtains, but all I could see was darkness. I was alone. At least, I thought I was. My heart pounding in my chest as I realized I had to escape. With trembling hands, I grabbed my bag and quietly slipped out the back door, hoping to make it to my car undetected. The night air was cool against my skin, but the fear coursing through me made me feel alive. I ran toward the parking lot, glancing back at the motel, the lights flickering ominously, and I could feel a presence behind me. I reached my car, fumbling with my keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Just as I got the door open, I heard a growl behind me, low and menacing. I turned, and my blood ran cold. There, emerging from the shadows, was the figure I had heard in the cabin, a gaunt man with hollow eyes, his smile twisted and predatory. "Where do you think you're going?" he purred, stepping closer, his form shifting in the darkness. I jumped into the car, slamming the door shut and locking it. My heart raced and I fumbled with the keys, desperate to start the engine. "Get away from me!" I screamed, but he merely laughed, a chilling sound that echoed in the stillness of the night. The engine roared to life, and I threw the car into drive, tearing out of the parking lot. I didn't stop until I was far away from Crescent Bay, the road stretching endlessly before me. I drove through the night, the adrenaline coursing through my veins, the figure's laughter echoing in my mind. Eventually, I found myself on a deserted highway, the moonlight illuminating the road ahead. I thought I was finally safe, but the memories of what I had encountered haunted me. I could still hear the growl, feel the weight of the darkness pressing in around me. As dawn broke, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold, I pulled over to the side of the road, overwhelmed. I was exhausted, both physically and mentally. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart, but I knew that the road trip I had envisioned was over. The adventure had turned into a nightmare, and I realized that some roads lead to places we're better off leaving unexplored. I looked back at the empty stretch of highway, knowing that the shadows of the woods and the figure that haunted them would follow me. A chilling reminder that some encounters are better left in the dark.